You and your partner can finish each other's sentences. You can also dismantle each other's arguments in under 30 seconds. You share a rare intellectual intimacy that most people will never experience. And somehow, that same intimacy is slowly making you both feel profoundly alone. If that sounds familiar, you're probably not imagining it. And you're definitely not the problem. Most people assume that two highly intelligent people in a relationship have an advantage. More understanding, better communication, fewer misunderstandings. What almost nobody talks about is that high IQ in a relationship doesn't just amplify the good things, it amplifies everything. And the things it amplifies most powerfully are the hidden structural tensions that ordinary couples never even develop the vocabulary to name. This isn't a story about gifted people thriving. It's a story about gifted people quietly suffering in a very specific way, for reasons that are almost invisible from the outside. Let me start with the actual architecture of the problem, because it's not what most people think it is. High IQ couples are rarely defined by their intelligence scores alone. What defines them is a shared cognitive style, pattern recognition that runs faster than most people's conscious thought, an almost compulsive need to interrogate assumptions, and a particular kind of mental restlessness that doesn't fully switch off. Individually, these traits are strengths. Together, in a shared domestic and emotional life, they create a very specific kind of friction. Psychologists sometimes call it hyper-intellectual vigilance, the ability to see everything, every flaw in an argument, every inconsistency in a position, every gap between what your partner says and what they mean. Doesn't pause when you walk through the front door. It runs continuously. And when two people with that capability are pointed at each other across a dinner table, what looks like a conversation about whose turn it is to handle the weekend plans can become, within 4 exchanges, a quiet negotiation about autonomy, value, and identity. The surface content almost never matches the structural content, and both people know it, which makes it worse. The problem isn't conflict. Every couple has conflict. The problem is that high IQ couples have conflict at a depth that exhausts them faster, because neither person is capable of leaving a bad argument half-finished. There's always one more point, one more reframe, one more angle that hasn't been fully addressed. And because both people are genuinely intelligent, both people are often at least partially right, which means resolution doesn't come from one person simply being wrong. It comes, if it comes at all, from both people agreeing to stop, not because the issue is resolved, because they're tired. This affects different people in this dynamic in very different ways, and it's worth walking through some of those groups carefully. The first group is couples where both partners have high IQ, but different cognitive domains. One person is analytically dominant, fast with systems, logic, data. The other is verbally or emotionally dominant, fast with nuance, subtext, relational meaning. From the outside, they look like a balanced pair. From the inside, they're often speaking different languages at the same speed. The analytically dominant partner processes conflict as a problem to be solved, which means moving through it too fast feels like being dismissed. Both interpretations are reasonable, neither is wrong, but they pull in exactly opposite directions, and both people are smart enough to know it, which creates a secondary layer of frustration, not just about the original issue, but about the structural incompatibility itself. You start fighting about how you fight, and those fights are harder because they're about something real. The second group is couples where both partners are similarly dominant in the same cognitive domain, particularly analytical reasoning. These relationships often begin with an almost electric feeling of being finally understood. Someone who gets your references, someone who doesn't need you to slow down, someone who pushes back in ways that actually sharpen your thinking rather than blunting it. That feeling is real, and it matters. What comes later, often 2 to 5 years in, is a quiet power struggle that neither person fully acknowledges. Two people who are both accustomed to being the most analytically capable person in a room don't easily share that role. They don't fight about it directly, That would be too obvious. Instead, it shows up in subtle dominance dynamics. Whose ideas get refined versus whose get challenged. Whose career takes structural precedence. Whose definition of a problem gets accepted as the starting point for a conversation. These couples often describe a feeling of being intellectually respected and emotionally unseen at the same time. That combination is surprisingly common and surprisingly painful. The third group is worth addressing directly, even though it's uncomfortable. These are couples where there's a genuine IQ gap, not the perceived gap that one insecure partner imagines, but a real measurable difference in processing speed and depth. The higher IQ partner often describes a persistent low-grade loneliness that they feel guilty about naming, a sense that they are always, at some level, translating, softening their full thinking before it exits their mouth, choosing which observations to surface and which to leave alone. The lower IQ partner, meanwhile, describes an equally persistent sense of subtle condescension that they can't quite locate or prove. They feel managed more than they feel met. Both of these experiences are accurate, and because neither person is behaving with malice, neither person can fully be blamed. The gap creates a structural dynamic that both people live inside without having created it. The cruelest part of this scenario is that both people often genuinely love each other, and love is not enough to dissolve something architectural. The fourth group is the one that surprises people most. Couples where both partners are highly intelligent and emotionally self-aware, who have done the work, who understand attachment theory and cognitive bias and relational psychology, and who still struggle. These are people who know exactly why they're doing what they're doing, and do it anyway. The self-awareness doesn't always translate to behavioral change. It sometimes just adds a meta level of suffering. You watch yourself fall into a pattern you've already named and categorized, and you feel the full weight of knowing better and still not doing better. High intelligence can become a trap in this specific way. You understand the system, you can describe it with precision, and the description itself becomes a new form of distance from the feeling you actually need to process. Zoom out far enough, and you can see the emotional and psychological toll this architecture creates. High IQ couples have some of the lowest rates of what researchers call co-regulation, the unconscious emotional synchronization that partners use to calm each other down. Most couples do this without thinking about it. A tone of voice, a touch, a moment of warmth that short-circuits a rising conflict before it becomes language. High IQ couples are more likely to stay in the verbal register, long past the point where words are useful. They trust language because language is usually where their power lives, but emotional repair often happens below language, and that's the layer they consistently underinvest in. Over time, this creates relationships that are intellectually rich and emotionally thin. People who can discuss the philosophy of meaning in a marriage, but who struggle to just sit quietly together without one of them needing to say something sharp. The deeper consequence isn't just relationship strain, it's a particular kind of identity erosion. Many high IQ people in these relationships describe privately a gradual suppression of their full thinking, a learned restraint, not because their partner can't handle it, but because the cost of full expression, the thread it will pull, is too high on a Tuesday evening when everyone is tired. Intelligence that has nowhere to fully land doesn't disappear, it turns inward, and the person who used to feel most alive in the presence of their partner starts to feel most alive when their partner isn't there. Here is the shift that actually matters, and it is specific. The couples who navigate this well, not perfectly, but sustainably, are not the ones who learn to fight less. They're the ones who develop an explicit ratio of approximately 3 relational investments to every 1 intellectual engagement, not as a rule they follow, as a habit they build. 3 moments of warmth, physical presence, or genuine curiosity about the other person's interior world, not their opinions, their interior world, for every 1 moment of the high-speed intellectual engagement that the relationship is built on. The problem is not the intellectual intensity. The problem is that it crowds out everything else. Couples who protect the other registers, the quiet ones, the playful ones, the ones that don't require anyone to be impressive, create enough insulation around the intellectual core that it stops being a threat and goes back to being a gift. That's the whole thing. It's not complicated. It's just very easy to forget when both of you are brilliant and the conversation is always interesting. So here's the real question, and only you can answer it. Are you using your intelligence to build something real with this person, or are you using it to keep a safe and sophisticated distance? Those are not the same thing, and they don't always feel different from the inside. If this made you think, share it with someone who would find it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.